Before he became the most famous pharaoh in history, Tutankhamun was simply a young king facing the end of his life. Years earlier, he was only a child inside Egypt's royal palace. His father had changed the religion of Egypt, and the child would inherit the consequences. Inside the palace, not everyone accepted the new order, and the child was growing up in the middle of the conflict. Behind the walls of the palace, the new Egypt was beginning to fall apart. The palace was changing, and soon Tutankhamun's life would change with it. The palace was receiving disturbing news, and the young prince was beginning to understand that something was wrong. Something had changed inside the royal chamber, and no one was ready to tell the young prince why. The throne was still there, but the man who sat upon it was fading from the world. The palace had begun to prepare for a future no one wanted to face. Then, while the young prince was still a child, his father died. His father was gone. Now Egypt needed a new king. At only a few years old, the boy became king of Egypt. Now the child king faced his first great decision: to restore the ancient traditions of Egypt. The young king now returned to the ancient heart of Egypt, and the old order was coming back with him. Across Egypt, the old temples began to breathe again. Behind the crown, a child was learning the hardest lesson of all: how to rule.
But Egypt's peace was fragile. Beyond its borders, enemies were watching.
Egypt could no longer remain silent. Its armies were moving again. Across the battlefield, Egypt finally met its enemy. Then the silence broke. Then the silence broke, and the battle began. Then the battlefield shifted, and Egypt began to push its enemy back. The army returned victorious, and the young king was beginning to understand what his crown truly meant. The campaign was over, but the young king's real struggle had only begun. Now no one could see him as only a child. Tutankhamun had become the king who had to decide Egypt's future. Beside the throne stood his young wife, his companion through the final years of his reign. But behind the royal ceremonies, his health was beginning to fail. His body was weakening, but the crown still demanded everything from him. But his strength was fading. Soon, Egypt would face a future without its young king. That night, the palace fell into an unusual silence.
The news spread through the palace. The young king was gone. Now the royal household began preparing the ancient rituals that would carry the king into the afterlife. The king was prepared according to ancient Egyptian funerary traditions. Layer after layer of linen, protection and ritual surrounded the king. The king was placed within the royal coffin, surrounded by symbols of protection. The royal procession began its final journey toward the king's eternal resting place. After the long journey through the desert, the king finally reached his eternal resting place. The royal procession crossed the threshold of the tomb, beginning the final stage of the ceremony.
The final procession continued slowly through the narrow passage beneath the earth.
Among the treasures prepared for eternity were magnificent ceremonial couches, shaped as sacred animals. Guarding the king's eternal journey stood Anubis and the sacred canopic shrine. At the heart of the tomb stood the great stone sarcophagus, protected by layers of royal shrine.